The December wind, spiced with chimney smoke and regret, tore through the desolate streets of Old Mills. Snow had fallen, but the soot had stained it a sickly grey, mirroring the guilt that gnawed at my soul. Christmas lights clung to the skeletal remains of the town like cheap tinsel on a coffin. I was finally here, in this birthplace of Paul, my best friend, the ghost of a promise echoing in every rusted creak and hollow moan. It had been 10 years since he'd slipped away, a flicker of laughter extinguished in the icy grip of pneumonia. We were 20 then, brimming with invincibility and foolish oaths sworn under a summer sky. One starry night, gazing at the Milky Way from a moss-covered hill, we'd made a pact: if neither found the one by 30, we'd marry each other. Paul, my whirlwind of chaos, his passion a crackling firework display in the still canvas of my life. Me, the ever-present shadow, forever chasing his sunbeam. He never doubted the promise. I did, every damn day. But cowardice and comfort kept me anchored, weaving a life of beige normalcy while Paul danced on the precipice of adventure. His death a brutal slap, forcing me to confront the hollowness I'd built. So here I was, 25 years late, a lone soul in a town haunted by memories. The mill houses, once monuments to prosperity, now stood like toothless predators, shadows swallowing secrets in their gaping maws. I found Paul's childhood home, an echo of faded grandeur crumbling under the weight of neglect. It was Christmas Eve, yet no flicker of joy illuminated the windows. Only a flicker of movement from an upper floor, a shape that vanished the moment I met its gaze. An icy dread slithered down my spine. Paul loved Christmas. He spoke of it with the reverence of a child, eyes twinkling with mischief and tales of snow angels and stolen kisses under the mistletoe. This bleakness screamed wrongness, a dissonance that set my nerves on edge. Driven by a morbid curiosity, I pushed open the creaking door, a wave of stale air laced with something akin to decay assaulting my senses. The Christmas tree in the corner resembled a skeletal hand reaching for the peeling wallpaper, its ornaments tarnished trophies of forgotten laughter. On the mantelpiece, a single photograph held my gaze: Paul, grinning like a madman, a child perched on his shoulders, her eyes brimming with the same mischievous delight Paul always possessed. A faint scratching echoed from upstairs, pulling me like a morbid marionette. Each step on the rickety staircase reverberated in the hollow silence, my heart a frantic drum solo against my ribs. The room at the end was shrouded in darkness, the air thick enough to strangle. A single candle flickered, casting grotesque shadows on the walls. There, silhouetted against the window, stood the girl from the photograph, now a woman, her face frozen in an ageless scream. But it wasn't her that sent the blood draining from my face. It was the figure beside her, tall and skeletal, the fabric of its existence woven from smoke and shadow. Paul! But not my Paul. This entity was a hollow husk, eyes burning with an infernal hunger. His voice, when it rasped out my name, was a rusty blade ripping through my soul. "You're late," it croaked, accusation dripping from each syllable. "You always are." The truth crashed upon me like a tidal wave. This wasn't Paul. This was something darker, something birthed from my unfulfilled promise, the festering wound of my guilt. This was the price of my tardiness. The air crackled with malevolent energy as the entity lunged. I stumbled back, tripping over a discarded toy horse, its painted smile mocking my terror. My scream echoed in the room, a pathetic counterpoint to the howling wind outside. Then, a flash of crimson, a metallic clang. A woman stood between me and the darkness, her eyes steely, a poker in her hand. The girl from the photograph. The spirit of Christmas past, risen to protect a broken pledge. The battle raged, embers swirling in the darkness, clashing with the woman's fierce determination. I scrambled to my feet, adrenaline overriding my fear. I grabbed a fallen candelabra, its flames leaping like hungry tongues. Together, we forced the entity back, the flickering light its bane. It hissed, a wounded beast, its form warping, dissolving into the shadows. As the last wisp of darkness vanished, the girl turned to me, her eyes filled with a sorrowful wisdom. "He loved you," she said, her voice a whisper against the rising dawn. "But promises unkept have teeth." I stood there, shivering in the hill, though modest in stature, loomed before you like Everest under a leaden sky. Each gentle incline felt like scaling a glacier, each breath a ragged wheeze in the biting December air. Memories, sharp as icicles, pierced your resolve, Each step a testament to squandered years and dreams left to wilt in the sunless garden of regret. But you wouldn't turn back. Not now. The summit, where Paul's laughter once echoed like wind chimes, beckoned with a mournful echo. To retreat was to drown in the swamp of self-pity, to remain forever chained to the ghost of your inaction. This climb, this pilgrimage, was your penance, your offering to the spirit of your lost friend. Your legs throbbed, lungs burning like bellows, yet you pressed on. Every bead of sweat was a confession, every labored breath a prayer for absolution. The past, once a comfortable refuge, now lashed you with its thorny tendrils. You saw yourself, youthful and vibrant, dreams clutched like fragile butterflies in your palms. Paul, a beacon of laughter, strode beside you, the world an oyster yearning to be pried open. But somewhere along the path, you'd tripped, tumbled into the quicksand of apathy. Choices, once brimming with possibility, morphed into excuses, into self-constructed cages. You'd retreated into the labyrinth of your mind, erecting walls of blame and denial, all the while letting hope atrophy in the shadows. The crest was within sight now, the wind whispering tales of redemption through the skeletal branches of ancient oaks. You stumbled, scraped your knees on the unforgiving earth, but the sting was a welcome reminder, a physical echo of the soul's ache. You wouldn't let the pain win. This was your mountain to conquer, your Everest to claim. As you finally reached the summit, breath ragged, body screaming, a wave of raw emotion washed over you. Tears, cleansing and bitter, streamed down your face. The view, once vibrant with shared laughter, now mirrored the desolation within. Yet, beneath the grey shroud, you saw a flicker of sunlight, a fragile hope pushing through the frost. This wasn't the end, you realized. It was the beginning. The hill, you climbed with such agony, had not been a monument to failure, but a bridge to redemption. You'd faced your demons, clawed your way back from the abyss, and in doing so, found a sliver of Paul's unwavering spirit within yourself. The memory of his smile, like a sunbeam breaking through the clouds, warmed your battered soul. You'd climbed the hill for him, yes, but ultimately, you'd climbed it for yourself. You rose, unsteady but resolute, and whispered a promise into the wind. You wouldn't be late anymore. Not to life, not to hope, not to the echoes of love that still resonated within. The descent was easier, not light, but with a newfound lightness in your step. You carried the scars of the climb, yes, but also the quiet grace of having faced your Everest. The future, once a bleak wilderness, stretched before you, a path waiting to be forged, not with the reckless abandon of youth, but with the hard-won wisdom of a soul that had stared into the abyss and emerged, blinking but unbowed. The promise you made to Paul, to yourself, wasn't a burden, but a torch. And as you walked away from the hill, bathed in the pale light of the rising sun, you knew you wouldn't be walking alone. Paul's ghost, no longer a spectre of regret, would walk beside you, a silent companion on your journey towards the redemption you both deserved. Halfway up the hill, I realized that I was carrying my former self up that hill. I had to. I had to bring him up that hill, for he was the man who had made the promise to Paul. Not me. I was an imposter. As I walked ever upwards, a fog lifted and I saw what it was that I must do. What it was that I was doing. This was redemption. This was the fulfillment of more than one promise. I was a promise and I was owed this much. At last I saw the bench, and in that instant something changed within me. I was lighter somehow, and that was when I remembered the plaque. I had seen the brass plaque that Paul's mother had had engraved, but never where it belonged. My steps were more deliberate and sure-footed as I approached the empty bench. I reached out with my fingertip and felt the indentations of Paul's name. That touch made it all real. All of it. I turned and sat on the bench, making space for the plaque and raising an inappropriately proprietorial arm up and resting it over the bench and Paul's name. Then I took in the view that he had so loved. A view that was much a part of him as his voice and the questioning eyebrows he raised so often at me. Now, as I sat here and looked out over Old Mills, I understood that Paul was a question. He challenged me, and that challenge had made me want to be a better man. I smiled as this dawned on me. I smiled because instead of feeling guilty and forlorn and ashamed, I felt more myself than I had in an age. I was back in touch with Paul here, and he was the conduit through which I was reconnecting with myself. An inexplicable feeling of peace and contentment rose up within me as I took in that view and thought of Paul and me. Me, the real me, not the facsimile that I had become, blaming Paul for leaving me when he'd never done anything of the sort. "Hello, Paul," I said to the view before me. "Late again, I see." I should have jumped out of my skin, but I didn't. I was at peace for the first time in a long time, and the sound of Paul's voice only added to that. "Better late than never," I replied, my eyes remaining firmly fixed on the view. "You say that?" Paul's voice was closer now. "You want me to apologize for letting life get in the way?" I asked him. "No," he said, "because that would be a lie." Riled by his words, I turned to remonstrate with the phantom I had created, and there he was. Not sat in the place I had allotted for my fantasy of him, but one place away, at the end of the bench. He sat there casually as though the last 20-3 years hadn't happened, and he sat there with a smile playing upon his lips, and an eyebrow raised in a challenge I knew I was not up to. "Hello, Gary," he said, "I've been waiting for you." I didn't say a word. Instead, I let out the longest of breaths. I didn't want to ruin this moment with banal commentary on the reality of my situation. But this wasn't a fantasy. This was as far away from a fantasy as could be. This was all too real, so as the words came, I left them unspoken. "I'm not here. This isn't happening. I'm sorry that I never got around to making good on my promise," I told Paul. "Our promise," he replied. "We'd both made the promise. Whoever remained when one of us passed. They were tasked with a pilgrimage such as this. A final reunion of sorts. Still." I began. "You're here," he said with a sad finality. "With you," I said. "Yes," he confirmed. "This is it then?" I asked him. And the bugger laughed. He actually laughed. "But then, that was Paul, since when has this been it?" he asked me. More melodrama from me. I had made this moment everything when we were always a part of something bigger. I felt that connection now. I felt part of something bigger. "You've always been a part of something bigger," Paul told me. "We are eternal. You have nothing to fear. Fear has never hurt you. It can't hurt you. Only you can hurt you when it comes to the matter of fear." "My life story," I said. "Gart makes sense," I echoed, feeling a strange lightness bloom in my chest. "Just one last thing, though." A flicker of curiosity crossed Paul's face. "What's that?" "Remember you used to joke about wanting to be cremated and sprinkled over old mills, like fertilizer?" I asked, a playful smile tugging at my lips. His grin widened, eyes twinkling. A little Paul scattered everywhere, growing with the wind. My smile turned chillingly cold. "Consider it done," I whispered, pulling a small vial from my coat pocket. "Only it won't be ashes I spread. It'll be you." Paul's face twisted in sudden horror as I uncorked the vial, releasing a cloying, acrid scent. Tears welled in his eyes as he choked out, "Gary, what dash?" But it was too late. The deadly concoction I'd spent months perfecting filled the air. Paul's form, once jovial and solid, began to disintegrate, dissolving into wisps of ash that danced away on the wind. His screams, raw and agonized, were swallowed by the howling December gale. I watched, a cruel and twisted smile playing on my lips, as my best friend scattered himself across the frozen landscape. It was my final act of defiance, a twisted fulfillment of the promise we'd made. He might have wanted to be sprinkled with the wind, but I'd chosen to let him become the wind itself, a ghostly echo forever trapped in the place he loved. The satisfaction was chilling, yet fleeting. As the last traces of Paul vanished, the emptiness gnawed at me. The warmth I'd felt was replaced by a hollowness deeper than ever, a chilling loneliness that resonated with the howling wind. I sat there, alone on the hilltop, a cold, empty shell of a man. I had kept my promise, but at what cost? This wasn't redemption. This was madness, a perverse victory that left me utterly devoid of the solace I'd craved. And as the wind whipped around me, carrying the faint taste of ash and regret, I finally understood the truth. The path to redemption wasn't paved with vengeance, nor with the twisted fulfillment of promises. It lay in letting go, not in holding on, even if it meant letting go of the ghosts that haunted me. I stood up, my legs trembling, and began my descent. The hill, once a symbol of guilt and regret, now felt like a monument to my own descent into darkness. And as I walked away, back towards the world I had abandoned for so long, I knew that the true battle had just begun. The battle against my own demons, against the darkness that I had unleashed within myself.